Hey everybody, it's Matthew. Welcome back to the channel. Soundgarden Month is continuing today with another special video. We are going to be doing how to sing like Chris Cornell. Caveat, we're not going to sound like him because that's not how these things work. This is study the technique, learn what he's doing, and then apply it to yourself. And we'll give some examples of how he's using these techniques that we're going to discuss. A lot of Chris Cornell's sound is actually things you can't really replicate necessarily. The first thing was his physical condition through most of his career was very high. He was a very muscular, very strong person with ripped abs and all that, which really does help you sing a lot. He was also unnaturally loud, like his SPL, which is the, flat decibel level that your voice has, or, the maximum amount of volume that your voice can generate was extremely high. It's very rare for a person to be as loud as he was, and that combination of things together with your typical singing techniques is part of why he sounded so amazing. But anyway, let's dive in here into some stuff. Let's look at some of his early singing technique. So we're going to be looking at a sample of Hand of God, which is a song from 1987 that came out on the Screaming Life EP. And this song does showcase a bit of his range, but it has a very particular technique that he used early in his career, which is this sort of wailing, kind of scared kind of sound. And the way you would do this sound is you kind of go like this. Oh, no. See, it's kind of like you're scared. It's kind of like, oh no, oh no, ah. That kind of really worried type of sound. Which this is a technique that a lot of singers have used for a long time. Robert Plant was a very common user of that type of posture with his voice to be able to help his range and sound a little bit more powerful in it. Chris is doing a similar technique on this song. So let's hear an example. I'm going to show you guys this. Let's see if I can get up to it here. The hand of God lays high above thee. I'll be so good if you really love me. Let me feel your mighty crutch as you wore me out like wildfire calling Santa. So that's very high range there. It's pretty hard to do it, but we're using that technique to get higher. So let's start in a middle place like we did when I showed you the example at the very beginning. And let's start pushing that up. So as you can see, you can get pretty high in your range just by doing that technique, and it still feels pretty comfortable even when you're using a lot of distortion like that. Now, I might not be able to use quite as much as him because I can't push that hard. Again, disabled, muscular dystrophy, yeehaw, all that stuff. But anyway, that's a good example of that kind of technique. Before we move on, let's spend a minute and talk about compression. Again, vocal compression, we have talked this thing to death, but it is the one of the single most important techniques for singing, and that is, of course, pushing with your lower abdomen and the muscles down there in order to compress the air once it comes to your throat. So no compression, ah, compression, ah. There's the difference. So you push with that, and then you want to get lower support, which is the muscles kind of in your butt. It's the same kind of thing you would if you were on the toilet pushing, you know what I mean? That kind of support system, all that, and then we combine it with the other techniques, and we get glorious distortion. Okay, so that last example was a range-filled one. Let's talk about one that's not quite like that. Let's talk about Chris's lower range. Now, his lower range is not too different. He's very compressed, but he relies more on the forward resonance of his voice to get his tone. So instead of what we did before, you would be more down here in the lower part of your voice. So you're down here. Don't open your mouth too much. Keep it narrow. Don't open it like this. We want that kind of sound. Very easy one. Make sure you compress a lot. In your lower range, you will feel like you need to compress more to get the same results. So keep that in mind. So let's run through a little bit of the start of Incessant Mace here, and I'll show you guys what we're dealing with. So he's afraid he'll suffer his father's fate. 2 sets of silverware cups and plates. 2 bloody hands and bleeding hearts. Yeah. But don't feel it's not too late to start. So there's an example of his lower range there. Of course, he moves in to his higher range later in the song. Now, you heard the low part I talked about. So he's afraid he'll suffer his father's fate. So very closed mouth, very narrow, lowering our voice with compression, and you get that wonderful sound with forward resonance. Now, you can hear he starts flirting with higher range a little bit. Comes and plays. So you want to keep that, put that more up into your mask in your nose than we were before. So father's fate. So that feels way a little bit lower, less in your nose, and then you put it in your nose with plates. Plates. So you can hear that little bit of a difference there, and that's our through line. To get to the rest of the song, he will start expanding into that mask nasality more once his range gets higher, and doing that transition, lower, getting that feel there makes it a lot easier when you get to the higher range to be able to do the same thing there. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well with this. If we go to the next part of the verse, which also extends into the chorus, you can hear how we're transitioning up into our higher range in a smoother way. The note divisions of the melody in this next part at the beginning are a little weird to me. I don't exactly quite remember them, but you'll get an idea anyway. Only the photographs on your wall are chained and down your hall, reminding you of all the days, yeah, when you collected hell to pay. Well, hell to pay, I said it's not too late. No, it's not too late, yeah. Incessant maze. Incessant maze, oh yeah. Okay, and I'm going to stop at the high range part because I don't want to kill my voice right now. But you get that idea how we're moving up into it. He also opens his mouth more, which is why when you get to reminding you, that sounds a little bit different. Because if we had our mouth closed like we did before, reminding you of all. See, that would be a little weird there, but that's not what we want. We want it to be more open. Reminding you of all the days, yeah. That's why that's a little bit of a change there, but we're still up in our nose through this part as we do that transition. All right, let's go to something. Okay, so we talked about those first two things there with earlier Soundgarden. Now when we get to Bad Motor Finger, there's a little bit of a transition period before that and Louder Than Love, but we really want to get the results of that, so we're going to go to Bad Motor Finger, where he does change his singing style up a little bit. He's relying less on that shrill, higher pitched sound and going for a more gutsy kind of more chest voice in his mix type of sound. And he's also changing some of his vocal posture a little bit with what he would be normally doing that we talked about with the whine scared sound that we talked about. That is kind of gone a little bit, and now we're doing a more kind of back in the throat crowish thing that's more like this. Ha! That's just a basic idea of that. Ha! Ha! You want to make that kind of noise, and the way you do that, open your mouth, show your top row of your teeth, not the bottom row, and that should get you your soft palate in the position it needs to be to make that sound. Ha! That's a big change from where we came from. Of course, this sound, you still can get that same high range thing. Ha! Kind of like that a little bit, but it is a little bit different, and I think this does require a little bit more strength from your abdomens to get this to sound really decent. This one's going to be the trickiest thing that we're probably going to look at today. So, and a good example of this, of course, is Outshined. So we're going to do a little bit of that first verse thing, and then maybe I'll show you the chorus a little bit after that as well. Now, let me see if I can remember the lyrics. I got up feeling so down. I got off being so loud. I kept the movie rolling, but the story's getting old now. Oh yeah. Well, I just looked in the mirror, and things are looking so good. I'm looking California and feeling Minnesota. Oh yeah. Okay, skip the pre-chorus and we'll go into the chorus. Show me the power, child, I'd like to say that I'm down on my knees today. Yeah, it gives me the butterflies, gives me away till I'm up on my feet again. Hey, I'm feeling outshine, 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 outshine. So you guys hear that example there? That's a way different sound. So we're relying way more on power for this type of thing than we were before. And the earlier stuff, he's kind of letting himself fly up into his range a little bit. He's not really worried about the tone up there. He's kind of just trying to get there with some distortion. This is a little bit more particular because you're trying to get the distortion, but you're trying to keep the feel of the tone of your voice a little bit rounder and not as shrill. So that can be a little tough. Without the context of the song, again, the technique, open your mouth like this, show your front teeth, not your bottom ones, and let it rip. Ha! So it creates a little bit different texture there. Before we would have been more like this in that upper range. Ha! But instead, we're a little bit more rounder, like I just showed you there. All right, let's keep her going here. So for this, we're going to talk about a little bit of a quieter kind of sound. This one's a little bit different than what we talked about with Incessant Mace, which is very compressed. This is a little bit more nuanced of a thing that he started kind of doing quieter on Super Unknown, which was, a little bit less aggressive kind of sound, a little bit more relying on the airiness or the lightness of your head voice. So we talked about that before. Again, refresher. So he's afraid he'll suffer his father's fate. Instead, we're going to go to Mailman here and look at the verses on that so you get an idea of what I mean. Hello, don't you know me? I'm the dirt beneath your feet. The most important fool you forgot to see. I've seen how you give it. Now I want want you to receive. I'm sure that you would do the same for me. All right, so there's that mailman example. I forgot the lyrics at the last line, so there's going to be a weird cut. Anyway, you get the idea. So we're a little bit more nuanced here. We're kind of floating around. He's going in between a more compressed and lower sound to a lighter, more head voice kind of sound. And of course, you hear the couple of falsetto moments in there as well, and you get that idea. He does a similar thing on Fell on Black Days with the verses. So you guys should be familiar with that. Whatsoever I feel has come to light, and whatsoever I thought of became my life. Although on that, he's not as, up and light in his head voice. It's kind of in between there. It's less light than this, because when he goes up, it's more like, hey, which you can hear the head voice in there, but it's a little bit more compressed and distorted than some of the lines in Mailman, but you get the picture we're painting with that kind of technique. Lowering your voice, and you're being very careful. You're being kinda light, but not too much. You just want to be really gentle with it. Don't really push it super hard. Just, let the resonance of your voice do the work there. So just take what we did before with Incessant Mace and get less aggressive with it is the best way to really think about this. So the last thing we're going to talk about is Chris's next vocal change that happens when he's older. We're going to be looking post-Soundgarden reunion stuff here. So we're going to jump to King Animal era. And what happens with Chris's voice is his voice got pretty damaged in the early 2000s because of his drug and alcohol problems that he was having. And I think the way he was singing for part of that time was also probably not healthy, because he was trying to, get around that in some unhealthy ways. So his voice got kind of messed up. He got some help in the mid 2000s and started working on his voice to get it to a place where he could use it well, even though his voice sounded quite a bit different as he aged. But King Animal is a good example of him getting to that point. His voice is a little bit different. The way he sings is a little bit different, but mostly because of how he's opening his mouth. And also his tone's just naturally very different at this point due to age. He's doing that same thing we talked about before with the front teeth out and, doing that ah or that ah sound. But this is different because with this, he's relying a lot more on the airflow, and he's not opening his mouth as much. It's a little bit more narrow than what he might have done previously. So that's the big change. And it gives his voice this extremely airy quality where you can really hear the air as it comes out when he's trying to compress it. So it's something that's an adaptation because it doesn't take as much pushing to replicate this sound that he does at this point, which is good for you when you get older to try to do that, because your support and those things are not going to be as strong. So if we look at Blood on the Valley Floor here and do some stuff with this, you'll hear what I'm talking about. Mountains all around, all together we stumble, 11 million clowns, everyone with a razor out, and the smoke lines on the valley floor, and the blood dries while we spill some more. So you get that idea there, and his distortion ends up having a lot of false chord higher in his range, which is a new thing for him. My voice is getting real tired. And you might have heard that I was getting tired at the beginning of that before I settled in. But that's what we're talking about there. It's something that takes less push, and you can still get the same amount of distortion by using false chords instead of using straight up power from your abs to compress the sound to get distortion. And there's a higher pitch fry scream or false chord thing that he does on this song that I'm kind of inconsistent with, so I don't know if I can do that. Hey! So kind of like that a little bit. Hey! My voice, my tone's a little bit brighter than his on this, so that may not sound quite the same, but you kind of get the idea with the false chord there. So anyway, let's recap real quick, guys. We talked about the very worried, scared sound that we talked about at the beginning. That kind of thing. Then we talked about the very compressed lower part of the voice. Yeah. And then we talked about the crowing kind of sound with more power and all that stuff. So that kind of thing. Then we talked about the more airy, more nuanced kind of low part of the voice, which relies more on the head voice. Hello, don't you know me? I'm the dirt beneath your feet. So that kind of thing. And we talked about old Chris with the narrower mouth doing the crow kind of sound and relying more on false chord than he is straight up power from his abdomen. Hey! There's that techniques there. Those are some pretty universal techniques with his voice that you hear a lot on particular things. Most of what he's doing is kind of a mixture of those different things, you know, depending on the context and depending on the note or the vowel that you need, manipulating around that and using different combinations of those techniques to get you the same sounds. So like his techniques aren't that ridiculous or anything. They're pretty simple kind of things. He's just very good at changing those in very subtle ways. And he's also was just a physical freak that could do whatever he wanted with his voice just on, you know, sheer power and determination alone. And the fact that he was stupid loud, which affects your compression a little bit differently. Because if you can just be louder, then, you know, your distortion and stuff is just going to sound bigger. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video looking at some of Chris Cornell's techniques here and learning a little bit of what makes him tick and a little bit more of how to sing like him. I'll leave a comment down below if you want. As always, you know, like and subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the bell so that you know when new videos are out on the channel. And with that, I will see you guys next time in another video. Have a good one.